call this meeting to order, and Happy New Year, everyone. To start off, Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our city clerk will do the roll call for tonight to the board of the commission.
Commissioner Black?
Present.
Commissioner Green?
Here.
Commissioner Colo?
Here.
Commissioner Pagano?
Present.
Commissioner Pizzuto?
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Commissioner Salvio? Here. Commissioner Templeton?
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. Good. Our next action item of business is by the firm of Kramer and Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dan Casagrande. I'm a lawyer with the firm of Kramer and Anderson, attorneys for this commission. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, there's just 2 points of order that you may want us to take up at the outset, just for the benefit of the people that are here, and that is in terms of setting some guidelines for time for public remarks. If you'd like to address that at this point.
Yes, I'm planning to follow the normal aldermanic format of 5 minutes, and I'll give a 1-minute warning.
Okay. And again, the record should reflect that the purpose of that is not, we're not trying to cut anybody off. We've got 2 more public meetings after tonight. We just want to give everybody who wants to speak tonight a fair opportunity tonight without it getting too late. So if, the chair will, in his discretion, limit remarks to 5 minutes or so for everyone, and then everyone is welcome and encouraged to come back next time and the next time and comment as they wish. The next housekeeping item, Mr. Chairman, is there are some exhibits that we'd like to enter into the record. Some have already been received, some have not. And the way we've decided to, we thought the most efficient way to do this is, as the commission may know, once the website was up and running, there were links where people could submit comments. And so far, we have gotten 7 website comments. So what I'd like to do is hand up to the clerk. What we have is, I'll hand up 8+1 copies of all of the website exhibits, which we've labeled WS1 through 7 and WS non-form 1 and WS non-form 2. And these are simply copies of the submissions that have been received on the link thus far. I have a few extra copies, not many, but obviously anybody who wants to get extra copies, you can go on the website, or if you need, just call me, we'll get you hard copies. The next set of exhibits that we'd like to have introduced into the record are what I call the hard copy exhibits, and there's only 6 of them. The first one is the conceptual draft plan or map that Dr. Morrison has prepared, and that's the map. Just for the record, out in the hallway there are 2 sets of maps that Dr. Morrison prepared. They're the same map. One is just the conceptual map, and that's a little smaller. The other is the conceptual map showing the neighborhood boundaries or street descriptions, and that's blown up a little bit larger so that people have a way to figure out where they sit in the proposed, or I should say the draft district plan. And for the record, I have extra hard copies of Exhibit 1 is the plan showing the neighborhoods, and Exhibit 2 is the conceptual draft plan without the neighborhoods. So I'd like to, I have just one copy of those, or the clerk, I understand the clerk is handing out copies of those Exhibits 1 and 2 now. Exhibit 3, for the record, is, you'll recall last time, I made a PowerPoint presentation at the December meeting, and I believe we submitted hard copies of that. If we haven't, we'll get those to you. That was just a general summary that I did, and then Dr. Morrison did an initial presentation at that meeting. And so for the record, we'd like to enter those as Exhibit 3 for my PowerPoint at the December meeting, and Exhibit 4, which is Dr. Morrison's PowerPoint. The next two exhibits, 5 and 6, which I'd like to hand up copies of. Exhibit 5 is a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm going to be giving in just a minute, so I'll hand up 8+1 of those. Through the marshal. And Exhibit 6 is a copy of Dr. Morrison's presentation, which he will give after my PowerPoint. So I will hand up 8+1 of his PowerPoint for tonight. Okay, with the chair's permission, I'd just like to begin my very hopefully brief presentation. Some of this is a rehash of what I went through last week, but I know not all commission members were here last month, and I think it's good for the committee to just understand as it goes through the process the general parameters of the law that governs not only Dr. Morrison's task in proposing a plan to you, but also your goal in recommending a plan to the aldermen. So the first page is basically why are we here? We're here because of the charter that was amended in November at the referendum, and that's Section 3A-1. That's one of the provisions, but it's the one that's salient to your review. And that basically says that the Board of Aldermen shall consist of 15 aldermen and alderwomen, collectively referred to as aldermen, with 3 aldermen from each of the 5 districts as approved by the Board of Aldermen. The 3 districts with the highest votes in each district will be elected. Of the 3 aldermen elected by each district, no more than 2 shall be from one political party. And subsection 1 of that goes on to say the city shall be divided into 5 voting districts. Said voting districts shall each contain substantially equal population. Voting districts shall be established in as compact and contiguous form as practicable, and boundaries must follow geographical divisions and currently existing state of representative districts wherever practical. Such city districts must conform to applicable state and federal law. Also, just, this is not on the slide, but also just call your attention to 2B-2 of the charter, which was also amended in November, that basically says no elector can vote for more than 2 candidates in their district. And I want to say at the outset that I know that one of the Commission's concerns is about the language in the last sentence of subsection B, saying that no more than 2 aldermen shall be from one political party. I know there's been some concerns about that. We will be here either at the next meeting next week, or at the very latest, the January, I believe it's the 22nd, meeting with an opinion for you on that issue and other related issues that we know have come up. So, when you look at subsection 1, the voting districts, that's really an encapsulation of what are known as traditional districting principles. When a municipality or a state goes to create districts, the Supreme Court of the United States, as well as other states in their constitutions, have said these are the basic principles that you have to adhere to. Substantial equality in population, contiguity, respect for boundaries, etc. I'll get those into a minute. So that's kind of the starting point for your task. Now, together with those principles, we have the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which you also need to consider in making your recommendations to the board. And the 14th Amendment, in the provision, the portion of it that's relevant here, says no city shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. It actually says no state, but it's been applied to political subdivisions of states, which are cities. So how does the 14th Amendment apply here? Equal protection means that, number one, districts must be substantially equal in size. That's the so-called one person, one vote standard. Does it require mathematical precision? If you have 100,000 voters, do you have to have exactly 20,000 in each of the 5 districts? No. What the courts have tolerated is generally a range of 10%. In other words, the difference between the population in the largest district and the population in the lowest populated district cannot be more than 10%. As Dr. Morrison will say to you, our goal is to be even more conservative than that and try to get it in within 5% of the maximum deviation. And equal protection also means not only substantial equality in population, but it means that districts have to be drawn based on the traditional, or taking into account the so-called traditional districting principles that have evolved over time in the courts. And those principles, and the Charter pretty much reflects them, but they are compactness. You want to have districts that are geographically compact, that recognize and to the extent possible don't separate communities of interest. And as Dr. Morrison will explain, that can be anything from a neighborhood association to a neighborhood block. It varies, and it's a highly factual inquiry, and that's one of the things I know you're going to want to talk about. Minimization of boundary changes. That's basically a reflection of the Charter and state law, which says you should try to adhere to the House Assembly, the 5 House Assembly district boundaries, to the extent you can. It's not mandatory that you do adhere to them exactly, but you should try to do that. And the fourth factor is try to protect against incumbents fighting against each other for seats in the new district. Does that override all the other factors? No, but it is a factor that the courts have said you may, as a districting commission, legally consider. Is where are the incumbents? Will they lose seats? Can we do something to prevent that, consistent with the other principles? So, in addition to the 14th Amendment, you also have to consider the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. In Section 1 of the 15th Amendment says, the rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state, including cities, on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. That's the springboard for the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was passed in the Johnson administration and subsequently amended in 1982. And so the Voting Rights Act is essentially Congress's attempt to codify the requirements of the 15th Amendment that voting statutes and election laws should be drafted so as not to dilute the rights of access of minorities to the ability to elect candidates of their choice. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is the section that's applicable here, basically says voting standards, practices, and procedures which deny or limit the right to vote based on race, color, or language minority are prohibited. A violation is shown if the evidence shows that protected minorities, which would include African Americans, Hispanics, and those are the two that are most relevant, I believe, to our case. If those protected minorities have less opportunity than others to participate in the political process with regard to both the nomination and the election of the representatives of their choice. A violation is shown based on the totality of the circumstances. And I can tell you that there have been legions and legions of decisions by federal courts and the Supreme Court since 1965, and especially since 1982 when the statute was changed, basically trying to parse out what that means in a variety of factual contexts. There's no bright line rule, but basically in considering whether a plan violates the Voting Rights Act, a court would have to consider the totality of the circumstances, and you, therefore, in your recommendations, will need to consider the totality of the circumstances in deciding whether this draft plan that Dr. Morrison will be discussing with you tonight takes into account the rights of minorities to participate in the Waterbury electoral process. One thing that the cases say that the past success of minority candidates is considered. In other words, you can look at whether in Waterbury there's been a history of electing or not electing minority candidates, but there's no such thing as a right to proportionate electoral success based on your proportion. In other words, if there are 35% African Americans of voting age within a district, that doesn't mean that they have a right to elect 35% of the representatives in that district. The key is access. What the Voting Rights Act talks about is access. The scheme, or the legislative scheme, has to give minorities equal opportunity to participate in the process. That's what the statute calls for. You're going to hear a lot about the concept of minority voting dilution. What is vote dilution? It's basically a form of denial or abridgment prohibited in the Voting Rights Act. Dilution of the right or acts of minorities to participate in the electoral process. Dilution can occur in several ways, which Dr. Morrison has a great deal of experience on. Very generally, one is division, or what's called cracking, of a racial or language minority group among districts in a manner which prevents the minority from being able to elect the candidate of their choice. In other words, if you take a minority group, let's assume it's compact, and you decide to draw districts so that they're all fragmented out into other districts, and that way their voting rights are diluted in all the districts. That's a scheme that the courts will look at very suspiciously. Packing is also a form of voter dilution. That's where a plan concentrates a minority group into one district far in excess of, perhaps its actual percentage in the population, and then all the other districts, they have no say. And some plans have been struck down. For example, there was one in Hempstead, New York, that the Second Circuit struck down, where the Hempstead tried to create two districts. One district was 97% black, and the other 5 districts were all white. And the Second Circuit said that, that there's no more blatant form of racial gerrymandering than that. So that's an example of packing that's prohibited. Okay. So what is Dr. Morrison's task, and what is your goal here? The task is to create a plan that takes minority populations into account, i.e., what he has done and what you will need to consider and ask him questions on, a lot of questions before you make your determination up as to whether this plan works or not, is does the plan take into account or create geographically compact majority-minority districts or majority-minority coalition districts? And if they can be drawn in such a way that a perfect district would be a circle. That doesn't happen in real life. But what courts look at is the district that you're looking to draw compact enough and contain a majority of a minority population in that particular district, and is not drawn in such a weird, bizarre way that it smacks of race being the sole consideration. So that's the first thing that Dr. Morrison and you need to analyze. Can these geographically compact majority-minority districts be created? And that task obviously involves consciousness of race. I mean, that's what you do when you're trying to figure out whether there's a majority-minority district. And this is the key, race is a factor, but it is not the predominant factor. It cannot be obviously it cannot be the sole consideration, it cannot even be the predominant consideration. You also have to make sure that you're in compliance with the substantial equality of population requirement under the 14th Amendment, and you also have to make sure you're following traditional districting principles. So basically, the law requires you as a commission to engage in a balancing act where you're recognizing and accommodating different competing interests in order to make sure that the plan you create is fair to the voters in the city and also doesn't run afoul of these minimum legal requirements that we've talked about. It's a fine line that you have to walk, and that Dr. Morrison has had to walk in coming up with his draft conceptual plan, which I want to emphasize is a draft. This is presented to you tonight for one purpose, for your input, for the public's input. If nothing is carved in stone, we want, Dr. Morrison especially wants and needs the people who have looked at the plan to educate him. He's not from this city, I'm not from this city, as to does it make sense in terms of geographical boundaries, neighborhood district recognition. That's why we're here tonight. So it's a fine line, but I'm confident, based on Dr. Morrison's expertise and the commitment of this commission, that you'll be able to come up with something that will be highly defensible and will be a credit to this commission that you can recommend to the board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Morrison, who will present his analysis and his PowerPoint on his draft plan, and then the chair, in his discretion, will turn it over to the public for their input on the draft plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, folks. I'm Peter Morrison, and I'm going to present an overview of how the city can transition to electing its aldermen by district. Mr. Casagrande has outlined for you the legal parameters that govern reapportionment, and I'm here to report to you on our progress to date in terms of adhering to these parameters. And then following my presentation this evening, we're going to commence with what I hope will be the main order of business, which is to seek input from the public and from the District Reapportionment Commission. Let me just give you a quick outline of what my presentation is going to cover. First, I want you all to have a clear understanding of my role in this process, and that role is to guide you toward a reapportionment plan that balances your collective priorities as a community and complies with the law. And to do that, I'm going to rely on official census data to establish the numeric criteria that I would put forth to document your compliance with the law so that you will be able to say this plan is in compliance and it does reflect what our priorities are. I'm aiming to have this first round of actual draft plans available for your review at next week's public meeting. And I want to emphasize that What you're looking at tonight is what I regard as a point of departure plan, a starting point which allows me to say I've got the legal mandates under control. This is where we start. I can tell you what has to be kept the way it is, and I can tell you what can be modified or where modifications can be made. So what I envision from this first plan that you're going to look at tonight and the input that you're going to provide is that I will be able to come back next week with 3 actual draft plans that would be available for your review and consideration, and then further refinements. And I hope that clears up any confusion that may have existed before, when there was a sense that there were going to be 3 plans tonight and now there's only 1. We're at the starting point, and originally I don't think that we had envisioned being to the point where we are now, where we were going to be able to seek your input, but we can get started with that process tonight. What I anticipate after the process of input in the next public meeting and the one after that is a convergence on 1 or 2 alternatives, which I will then finalize as alternatives so the DRC can consider recommending one of them for adoption. When I say finalize, what that means is double checking all the numbers, making sure that there are no problems in terms of every boundary being exactly what we think it is. There's a kind of a quality control that has to go on, and that's what I mean by finalizing. It's a labor-intensive process, and I don't want to do that until we get to the point where we have a plan that you say, this is the one we want to go forward with. What I'm going to do is review the key measures and concepts that I'm working with. Then I'm going to show you what I think you want to know about Draft Plan 1 beyond just the map versions, which are outside. I want to show you some of the numbers I'm working with, and then I want to give you some thoughts about where you might consider making some refinements. So let's start with the key measures. We are going in out of order here. Okay. There we go. Key measures and concepts. There are demographic measures and there are legal concepts that I'm working with, and I just want to highlight the key ones. The first demographic measure is the total population, that is, all persons of all ages, both citizens and non-citizens. The city's total population, which is something that the Census Bureau gives us hard numbers on, must be apportioned equally across each of the 5 alderman districts. The next concept, or the next measure here, is the citizen voting age population, which we call CVAP for shorthand, citizen voting age population. This is a subset of the total population. It is just those persons who are citizens 18 years of age and older, and that's an important population because these are the people who are entitled to vote. So CVAP is the second relevant measure, and it is the official measure of a district's eligible voters. I'm going to be referring to eligible voters, and that is measured by CVAP. Next are the 2 legal concepts, which Mr. Casagrande has told you something about, and I just want to highlight them again. The first is that of protected groups. These are eligible voters of one or another minority, racial, or ethnic, or language group. And for our purposes here, the population of Waterbury has significant numbers of Hispanic eligible voters and Black eligible voters. And each of these groups is a protected minority under the Voting Rights Act. And lastly is the concept of minority vote dilution. This is a broad concept focused on how political boundaries, which is what we're establishing here, how political boundaries can scatter or concentrate like-minded voters in ways that may disadvantage them. For our purposes here, vote dilution results where Hispanic voters or Black voters are spread too thinly across several districts. when they could have been more highly concentrated in a single district, thereby affording them a greater voice in selecting aldermen. That's the key point to understand. Now, I'm obliged to help the DRC steer clear of any plan that could be construed as diluting minority voting strength, either of black citizens or of Hispanic citizens. And I'm going to explain to you now how I've implemented these key criteria on behalf of the DRC. No, it's okay. I think I was pushing the wrong button. I was talking forward and pushing backward. I've got it right now. First of all, and I'm referring now to the draft plan number 1, and this is going to apply to any further variant of it. I have assured that each alderman district encompasses roughly 1/5 of the city's total population, which would be ideally 22,073 residents per district. That is what is known as the ideal population. Just kind of file that term away. Ideal total population of a district. And as Mr. Casagrande has explained, in practice, each alderman district can have somewhat more, somewhat fewer than the ideal of 22,073 residents, but the overage or the underage should be less than 5%. That's the operational definition of substantially equal in population. That's the legal terminology. The next thing I have to assure is that any plan that I do present to you does not dilute the voting strength of either minority, and I want to emphasize either minority. Here, my interest is in the mathematical upper limits of that strength for each group. In other words, how would I know if I'm diluting the voting strength of a minority if I don't know what it could have been had my sole objective been to maximize the voting strength of that group? So I have engaged in a purely analytic exercise to determine what the mathematical upper limits are for forming an alderman district in this city in which Hispanics could constitute the highest share of eligible voters, and the highest share that they could constitute would be 50.2% of a district's eligible voters. It's impossible mathematically to achieve a higher concentration. For blacks, the same upper limit is 36.3%. For any one of you who is a skeptic, you can talk to me afterward and I will explain the steps that one goes about in establishing this proof, but I can guarantee that your eyes will glaze over before my eyes glaze over. Now, with these two benchmarks, which I want you to keep in mind, I can evaluate any actual plan and ask the question, has this plan empowered each group as fully as it could be empowered, or very nearly as fully? Or, on the other hand, is this a plan whose boundaries have the effect, not necessarily the intent, but the effect of diminishing the voting strength of either group to some substantial degree? And it is this latter effect that I want to steer you clear of. And there is no bright line that divides it between there's no effect or yes, once you go here, there is an effect. It's a judgment call. And it really has to do with trying to establish whether the group has substantially the same power, electoral power, under the electoral system that you're establishing. So once I have the population of each district properly sized, that's the total population, and once I can show that there is no dilution of minority voting strength of either of the groups in this city, I next can turn my attention to other traditional redistricting criteria, the ones for which I'm seeking your input tonight, and I'll return to those criteria in a moment. Before I do, I want to just give you the demographic parameters of Plan 1, so you can see how I've implemented the things I've talked about so far. This slide shows these parameters in a standard format. It'll take you a little bit of study to understand it, but I'm going to walk you through it for the first time so you can see what it says. And I want you to just look at it reading from the left column over toward the right, column by column. And you can see the first column on the left gives you the districts numbered 1 through 5. And incidentally, just as a footnote, these are not necessarily the numbers we have to use finally. It's just they're placeholders. You can call them anything you want, and you can reorder the numbers once we know what plan we're using. The next column over has the total population. And you can see at the bottom of that column, I've shown the ideal 1/5, which is 22,073. That's the one I said, that's the ideal population. And right above it, you see the citywide population, 110,366. You divide that by 5, and you get 22,073. Now, the green arrows point to the 2 districts where the population is either at the highest deviation or at the lowest deviation. The district number 4 population is, with 21,214 people, is 3.89% too small or underpopulated. And District 5, with 22,922 residents, is 3.85% overpopulated. And if you just look at the percentages above those 2 that are pointed to, you can see that all the other percentages are less, so they don't count here. Now, if you add the 3.89 and the 3.85 together and you ignore the minus sign, you see the 7.74 at the bottom. And that's one of the key demographic parameters, which is known as the deviation from ideal, and that's the number you want to keep below 10%. Ideally, you'd like to have it at 0, but the flexibility here means that if there are things you want to do other than just equalize population, you've got some wiggle room here, and that's what matters. Now, let's look at that's the 7.74 max total deviation. Let's look at the Hispanic share in District 2. You remember I said the maximum that could be achieved is 50.2%, and that's what we have right here. I think it may be 50.18 or something, but it rounds up to 50.2. So if somebody says, are you diluting the voting strength, the strength of blacks, of Hispanics in this plan, the answer is not measurably. And you can see that in District 4, the black share of eligible voters is 35.7, and as I recall, it was just a shade above 36 at its maximum. So I would contend that in the case of District 4, 35.7% is within rounding distance of what the black share's maximum is in a single district in this city. So I'm starting off with a framework here, a scenario, if you will, in which I can say I've got the population right-sized, and I've got one district in which Hispanics should have no problem, and another district in which blacks should have no problem. And I'm not talking about problems within the city, I'm talking about the possibility of a plaintiff outside the city looking at this plan and saying, well, you're violating the Voting Rights Act. And I think you have a strong basis for saying, not so far, not based on these numbers. You wouldn't have a case based on these numbers to say that there's been vote dilution. So I'm very comfortable with this as a starting point. And what I'd like to do is transition from this into what I'd like to be the main order of business tonight, which I hadn't really thought we were going to be able to get to until the meeting next week, but we can get quite a bit of it out of the way tonight. And that is to talk about ways to improve Draft Plan 1, because I do have some wiggle room in the sense that I can adjust the total populations. And I think I'm very close to the maximums, close enough to the maximums that it probably wouldn't matter if the 50.2% Hispanic became 50.1% or even 50.05% if there were some other consideration that you as a community wanted to incorporate as among the various traditional redistricting criteria. So let me suggest several of the directions that I think you might want to try to instruct me about tonight, and I can go back and see what I can do. As a first step, you might want me to try to unify established neighborhoods. I've been told that neighborhoods are very, very important in this city. I have a map, one of the variants of the maps outside, and one of the variants of the maps that you have if you have your reading glasses on, has a very faint red boundaries which show the boundaries of established neighborhoods that your city recognizes, and I think they are neighborhood associations. I'm not sure what they are, but I know that they are definitely recognized communities of interest in this city. And so what you might want to do is say, you know, the neighborhoods are really important to us, and we'd like you to see what you can do to clean up some of these neighborhoods where you've split them because you haven't paid any attention to them yet. And I think there is room to do that. And I'm going to show you some examples of what might be feasible in a moment, just illustration so you can see where I see the obvious opportunities even without doing the arithmetic. A second consideration is that Connecticut state law obliges me to use the boundaries of existing House of Representatives districts where feasible. And I intend to do this as well, although I don't need to give that priority over these other communities of interest if that's your priority. You can envision a House district boundary as a community of interest politically. You can envision a neighborhood as a community of interest in a sociological sense. And there may be other communities of interest that you will inform me about that are neither neighborhoods nor House districts that matter to you. For example, I've worked in some cities where they say, you know, we have an old historic downtown that we'd like to keep intact. It has significance to us as the historic downtown, and you've split it. Well, I can go back and look at that as a community of interest. Community of interest can be anything that you recognize and tell me is a community of interest. And then a third thing I can do, and I guess I'd like to do it after I do the first two or any other considerations, is to favor geographic compactness. This is what people in my field call the eyeball test. You look at the plan and you say, there's something really strange about these boundaries. And as you'll see in the maps that that refer to Plan 1, the boundaries look strange, and the reason they're strange is because I have worked very hard to maintain compliance with the Voting Rights Act and to achieve a very near maximum concentration of both minority groups in this city, despite the fact that they substantially overlap. So it's very hard to get it exactly right. So one group doesn't look at a map and say, well, you favored that group, but you dropped me 4 percentage points, or vice versa. I've tried to avoid that because I don't think that's productive and it doesn't lead anywhere. So anyhow, that's where we're at, and I want to just give you a couple of illustrations of where I saw some opportunities just looking at the maps, how neighborhoods might be unified. And I'm not picking these out as the first choices, but I'm just saying these are the easy ones I see, and if you instruct me about others, I can put those together and at least take a look at them and see what I can do. I'm going to start out with a picture of the big map that's out hanging on the bulletin board there. And this, you want to be looking at a map that says Draft Plan 1 with neighborhoods. And I think there's an 11 by 14 version of that that's been distributed to you. Hard to read, but if you take this map, and that's the legend, you want to be sure to read the legend. On the upper right, you see the red dotted box. That is Waterbury neighborhoods. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on. I'm going to say what's going on with these red boxed areas on the map. So let's take a look at a red box area here. Let's get oriented first. The yellow is one alderman district that I've created, and the brown is another alderman district I've created. And as you can see, the neighborhood that is named Platts Mills lies within each of them. All I need to do is say, well, let's extend the brown on the right, where the arrow is pointing to the left, all the way into the yellow area to include all of Platts Mills here in the brown area. That's going to add, looks to me like it might be a couple dozen people, a couple hundred people. I'm pretty sure that's not going to make any difference in terms of having substantially equal populations. So that would be one kind of boundary I could clean up. And I think you can see where that is because it's at the southwesterly corner of the city. That's why I picked it out. Here's another one where it would not be just changing the boundary, but it would be doing a swap. And again, you see the yellow is one alderman district, the brown is another alderman district, and the brown area points in the direction in which I would extend the brown alderman district all the way to the red boundaries on the upper left here, there, in a neighborhood I guess is called Woodtick Road. And that's going to add a fair amount of population, I think, maybe quite a bit. But I could offset that population imbalance by, if you look down on the lower part to Mill Plain, I could say, well, let's transfer some of the brown into the yellow, and we'll extend the boundaries of the yellow into the, so it aligns exactly with the boundaries of the Mill Plain neighborhood. So this is the kind of fine-tuning that I can go through neighborhood by neighborhood. In some places it will work, in other places it will throw off the balance. Sometimes I'll make a swap in one part and say this throws the population out of balance, but then if I go north and west, find another neighborhood where it's a mirror image, I can say, well, I can offset that. It's a very tedious process, but there's a lot of cleaning up I think can be done. So I would suggest that this is one direction in which you might want to instruct me to go. And I guess at this point, I'd like to say it's time for your public input, and I'm not sure exactly what format you want to follow, but I would like to hear what it is you'd like me to give priority to. And I'm also here to answer any questions you may have about, things that you just don't like about this plan. I think I can address those issues as well. So I'll stop talking and open the floor to whoever wants to speak first in whatever order of priority you want to call them.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Our Sheriff, Steve Conway, has a list of people that have registered that they want to voice their concerns, opinions, thoughts, and we will handle over to the microphone to Steve, and he can call the first person to speak. There will be a 5-minute limit. I'll give a 1-minute warning. And if you can just please state your name and your address for the record so that our city clerks will have a clear delineation who you are. And I now turn it over to Steve.
Would you like me to?
Yeah.
I'll sit.
Thank you. First speaker tonight from 70 Trumpet Brook Road, Ronald Napoli.
Ronald Napoli, 70 Trumpet Brook Road, Waterbury, Connecticut. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the Commission, I appreciate you taking on this enormous responsibility. The important work you do will certainly have a significant impact on the kind of representation and the quality of representation we enjoy in future years here in Waterbury. As you probably know, this has been a long debated issue in Waterbury, and finally it has come to pass. And I really do hope that you will, when you enter into deliberations, you will protect the integrity of our existing neighborhoods. Waterbury is a community of strong neighborhoods. It's the reason why we're different from other big cities in Connecticut. In 1995, the Waterbury Republican American produced this insert for the Waterbury paper, which told a great story about all of Waterbury's neighborhoods. And as the previous speaker just said, he recognizes that we have neighborhood organizations that advocate on behalf of the residents, and both for political issues and social issues and neighborhood concerns, whether it be pollution or litter, things like that. And I'm glad to hear that this draft one is just a draft, and the consultants are open to doing some substantial revisions of it. I have just a couple of concerns. The legislation that was adopted by the residents of Waterbury in November did say that you should consider, where practical, the existing state representative lines. And I presume that when the legislature adopted those lines, they did not violate the U.S. Constitution, the state Constitution, or any of our local laws. So to me, it sounds like that's a good place to start, and the draft plan seems to have completely ignored those lines. We do understand some tweaking will be necessary, but I think that this plan requires a substantial revision over where it is now. I think that we also want to avoid confusion in the voting process. The plan as has been presented thus far would associate people in the Bunker Hill neighborhood, for example, with the east end of Waterbury, as far as St. Peter and Paul School, the Bucks Hill neighborhood. To me, that's not a district that makes a lot of sense, either on paper or as a practical matter. And we're lucky in Waterbury. We have outstanding public servants. We have 15 outstanding aldermen. I have a particular favorite one, but we have great aldermen that serve the city. And I recognize that to some extent you would like to protect or avoid head-to-head conflicts, but I think that protecting the aldermen should not be your first consideration. That should be the last of your considerations. I think we want to produce neighborhood districts that unite people, not divide people. And again, focusing too much on the political considerations of protecting incumbent aldermen, I believe, would be a mistake. Thank you for your time and attention.
Next speaker, Mr. Chairman, is from 30 Newton Terrace, Kathleen McNamara.
Kathleen McNamara, 30 Newton Terrace. Is there a way to project the map on the screen so that speakers can point out certain sections of the map as they speak? Oh, okay. Can we bring in I mean, I think a lot of people are going to want to point out certain areas, and we're sort of at a loss here to explain what we're talking about. Okay. As I mentioned, Kathleen McNamara. I was former president of the Bunker Hill Neighborhood Association and the Waterbury Neighborhood Council, and also former project manager at WDC for Economic and Community Development, where we were responsible for shepherding through 5-year plans, annual plans, dealing with community development, block grant funds, home funds, et cetera. So, and now in my president capacity as grants administrator, I have the wonderful opportunity to work with a lot of you in the community. The past 2 evenings, I've spent numerous hours doing research. I'm a nerd. What can I say? I read up on the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, research state by state redistricting requirements, and also read analysis on poor practices as well as best practices. Surprisingly enough, considering the vast literature, there are commonalities amongst the studies. Basically, that people matter the most, communities matter. I would agree with the former speaker that I believe incumbency is probably one of those standards that I would put towards the bottom, especially since we're starting out with a system that doesn't have districts to begin with. So it's very hard to accommodate. The other thing that I found that I saw a lot about is that meeting the federal one person, one vote and the Voting Rights Act is paramount, but is really just a starting point, as Dr. Morrison said, amongst a number of recognized traditional districting standards. Compactness has been talked about. Interesting quote in one of the studies, keeping a district compact keeps a community intact. And compactness is smooth edges, solidity, districts that aren't far-flung. As studies have pointed out, a district is not sufficiently compact if it is so spread out that there is no sense of community, and members cannot easily tell who's actually in the district. We talked about contiguity, communities of interest. More and more, this has become the standard of community acceptance of a districting plan. District lines should not divide populations or communities that have common histories, living patterns or standards, employment patterns. Neighborhoods, core neighborhood centers or city centers should be respected. And thankfully, we're all here tonight so that we can have a say and input and shape some of the elements of this plan. We talked also about geography, and that's really important in the city of Waterbury, where you have the Naugatuck River shaping a lot of our communities. Just want to take a quick look at some of the things I observed. I live on 30 Newton Terrace. I think it's in the Orange District, which is District 1. My street is 2 blocks long, but it's been separated into two districts. I go up 5 houses, and it turns into District 5, which is the yellow. So if you're looking at the map, I'm somewhere right in here. The interesting part is District 1, which is orange, comes up and includes Bunker Hill Park, but Bunker Hill Park is separated from the rest of the Bunker Hill community. It gets even more interesting when you look at the purple district, which I believe is District 4, because that comes up right next to the park and separates the park and the yellow district from our school, our firehouse, and the library. So in the heart of one of the most traditional neighborhoods in the city, we have 3 districts. And here, what would seem to be easy, you have the river here and Route 73. Why would you do this? Why would you have the purple jumping across the river, which is a natural boundary, or the orange, when you could easily make a very compact shape? It doesn't make sense. I would say, just so I'm not accused of NIMBYism here, this applies to other neighborhoods. Let's move downtown. The yellow district crosses the river, grabs this building up to the green, but then you have the Mattatuck Museum, City Hall, separated from the Palace Theater and the Arts Magnet School, which are in a totally different district. So the center of our downtown is divided into 2 districts. I'm sure Commissioner Green can tell you that Brooklyn, its core is divided into 3 districts. It's already been divided once by a highway. I don't think you need more. And it goes on further. You know, when you talk about communities of interest, I'll be here in the Orange District. I don't see how I have more in common with communities way over here and not the people that live around me. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm hoping that this can be addressed. So I'm willing to be part of the effort that makes this plan better so that we meet all our federal requirements at the same time, respecting our established communities. So when we walk away from this process, we all feel great about it. I hope we can get to that point together. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next speaker from 41 Pilgrim Ave, Jimmy Griffin.
Chairman of the board, members of the board, good evening. Jimmy Griffin, 41 Pilgrim Avenue. I've listened to a lot of this over the years, and one of the things, I grew up on Long Hill, by the way. I grew right up on the top of Long Hill, in the old projects, which are no longer there. And if you go down a little lower, you can be around Warner Place, and that's no longer there. I moved into the Wild neighborhood, which was an Italian neighborhood at the time, and I lived there. So, you know, as the years have evolved, the demographics and the movement in the city has been pretty great. The one thing that I found after I left Waterbury and went away and came back some 25 years later was there was a disproportionate number of aldermen that weren't represented in our neighborhoods, especially in the Wild and the Long Hill neighborhood, North End, generally the North End. At any given time in history, there has never been more than 3 minorities elected to the Board of Aldermen at any given time. In 1995, when this first proposal came up, there was not one African American or Latino on the Board of Aldermen. And looking at the system, at-large systems historically dilute the voting of African Americans and Latinos. That's one of the reasons that over the years I fought tirelessly to change the way you elect aldermen in the city of Waterbury. It has come to the point now where when Mr. Morrison's photo went up in the newspaper, I was amazed because it told all the stories that I've been trying to express over the years about the lack of representation in specific areas. It's there, it's clear. The two districts that were highlighted should stay just the way they are. And that would give the other districts that are surrounding, you could tweak them, you could keep them within the state rep districts, you could do all kinds of things with them. And then when I saw the argument about incumbency, I was floored. You know, how the lines were drawn and how people panicked. They panicked, people panicked because they were afraid somebody was going to lose a seat on the Board of Aldermen. And I thought, well, we haven't had any seats on the Board of Aldermen in proportion to our population in the city of Waterbury most of my life. So what's the big deal? So the only thing I see as a problem right now is just taking the three districts, the 71st, the 74th, and the 73rd, and taking those districts and shaping those districts because the two districts that have been designated already are sufficient and representative of what we're looking at, and they're not overly populated with minorities. We're looking at a 50%. People could still win in that district. You don't have to be an African American or a Latino in those districts to win. You can still have people from all colors run in those districts, and it's a better deal than I've ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker from 22 Lee Street, Robert Petro.
Okay, Rob Petro, 22 Lee Street. Sorry for being slow. Had a little accident. Okay, I guess I saw the presentation, and to be blunt, I don't support the draft one. I've heard many complaints from citizens, voters, taxpayers, etc. And I live in the Bunker Hill area. And looking at the map, I seen that my neighborhood is split up into three districts. And I think one district has two board aldermen that live in it, one has one, and one has another. And it seems odd. The last two election cycles, I ran for board alderman. And what if I run again this year? What if by a sheer miracle I actually win? I wouldn't be able to work for or support my neighborhood I live in based on this draft. And you want to be part of your neighborhood. And I am a member of the Bunker Hill neighborhood group, and I feel I'm part of that community, and I want to keep it that way. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And what makes Waterbury a great city is the different neighborhoods we have, plus the identities they have. And I know it's a hard process, and I know this is something very new. And I don't think we should separate our communities of interest, as that said, and don't divide our neighborhoods. Like I said, I don't support the draft plan one. I know it's just a draft, but I think we need to focus on doing what the people want. And obviously, we don't want to dilute the voters, particular groups either. And I know it's a hard thing to juggle, but I think the Bunker Hill area should be one district, not three. And last thoughts, I'm going to throw a curveball. What if the population increases and decreases like 5 years from now or something? What's going to happen then? Do we come back here again and redraw the lines? And so that's something I was thinking about. Well, Happy New Year. Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you.
Next speaker from 259 Wood Street, Rachel Guest.
Rachel Guest, 259 Wood Street, which puts me in the WOW neighborhood, which I believe is the 4th district for this map. I'm going to repeat a little bit of what's been said, and like Kathy McNamara, I've done a lot of research trying to figure out how this will work, and it is very challenging to figure out how to draw up this map in a way that works well. The biggest problem with this first draft is that there's no regard for either neighborhood boundaries or even geographical boundaries, and that's been discussed, which is good. We've been told that the 2nd and 4th districts are the ones, we were told this earlier in the week, that the 2nd and 4th districts are the ones that have been primarily completed, but looking at them, they need a lot of work still. The boundaries of the 2nd and 4th districts are ragged, creating what I called small islands with no particular connection to the main body of the district. For example, if you know this area, the area around Atwood Avenue off of Wolcott Street is geographically disconnected from the rest of the district in which it was placed. There are several apparently random blocks of the 2nd district that jut into the 4th district in ways that fracture neighborhoods, including my own. There are numerous other examples of the problem, which I won't detail here, and I have submitted a map through the city website which shows how the draft plan could be revised to better reflect the existing communities. There are several problems with the ragged borders. The first is those islands, the random bits of neighborhoods that have no connection to the main body of the district. They can be in danger of being overlooked and neglected by their aldermen if there's no alderman living in that little isolated area. They will naturally be inclined to focus on the cohesive neighborhoods in their districts. The second problem is best illustrated by the way the 4th district, which is almost entirely located to the east of the Naugatuck River, includes that tiny bit of Bunker Hill, which has been discussed already, which is on the other side of the river. And in that tiny little bit of Bunker Hill for the 4th district is Alderman Larry DiPillo. So let's say, hypothetically, that these boundaries remain and that Alderman DiPillo wins re-election. The 4th district, which has a high concentration of minorities, will be represented by a white man who lives on the other side of town. Bunker Hill, in addition to that problem, Bunker Hill has nothing in common with the rest of the 4th district. It is a completely different neighborhood. It's geographically disconnected from the rest of the district, so it really doesn't make any sense to have it included. If anything could be construed as a violation of federally protected rights, that looks like a sticky spot right there. So it really is, a lot of what's been said already. We really need to look at those real neighborhood boundaries and the geographical boundaries to create a map that will actually function well. And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that I do have a concern about the 2nd and 4th districts having smaller populations than the surrounding districts, and I hope that that will be addressed going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 62 Avalon Circle, Richard Wood.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm just a point of curiosity. How many people here are under 30? Anybody? Oh, well, okay. Under 30. One. No, you've got to be under 30. Okay. The element here that we might be missing is that this redistricting is going to give opportunity to the younger generations. They will care. It's our job, they make them care. That's the point. But this is an opportunity for us to bring new people into our democratic system. Democracy is at stake, not someone's job.
Could you speak into the microphone,
Sorry about
please?
that.
Thank you.
But that's the key thing that's in here that is behind the scenes. A new opportunity for new people who have rights and privileges, but who are not now exercising them. It's just a thought to pass along in our conversations here and there to bring it to task. Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too.
Next speaker from 369 Clough Road, Christina Padilli.
Christina Padelli, 369 Clough Road. Honorable members of the Commission, I come before you to speak against this first draft of the Alderman by District map. This map flies in the face of the intentions of Alderman by District. The intent was to have elected officials in your neighborhood who you could go to in order to have issues addressed. The intentions were to bring back the power to the people. The intention was to lessen the power of the political machine. This map, as drawn, mocks the voters. This map is clearly more interested in protecting incumbent Democratic aldermen. This map clearly fails the eyeball test and might as well have been drawn by the political machine. One of the criteria required by the Charter Revision Commission was that the new districts be based upon the current General Assembly districts. This map does not fulfill that requirement. The General Assembly districts already passed muster with all voter rights laws and have produced state reps that reflect the diversity within the respective districts. A member of this commission, Mr. Green, has submitted drafts that took into account census data and trends, voter ethnicity, and overall population. They, however, did not take into consideration incumbency protection. Those maps look much similar to the current General Assembly districts. They kept neighborhoods together. They allowed for natural geographic borders which are already recognized. They would pass any legal scrutiny, but because they didn't fit into the need of the Democratic leadership, they were replaced by this draft map, which seems to be the definition of gerrymandering. The people of Waterbury voted for a better system. They deserve a better system. This map is a slap in the face to those people. I look to this commission to reject, or at least, very least, completely overhaul this draft map. We need someone to stand up for the people. It looks as though your commissioners are our last hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is from 70 Blackman Road, State Representative Larry Butler.
Good evening. My name's Larry Butler. I reside at 70 Blackman Road. I'm current state representative from the 72nd District, formerly an alderman. I'm very familiar with state representative districts. I am very familiar with being an alderman and campaigning in every corner of the city, knocking on doors all over the city. So I have a pretty good perspective, have done a lot of research myself. Let me just say that everybody in this plan, this draft plan, they already talked about all the things that's wrong with it. And as far as I'm concerned, you could just dismiss it. So I'm not even going to talk about it anymore. It fails so many tests, even the eyeball test. I told the person I was just going to take it and rip it up, but in your minds, you just imagine that, but I'm not going to do that. They told me, be too dramatic. Anyways, so let's just put that to rest. Take that plan and just, throw it in the can. Now, I'm here talking about solutions, okay? You want to know how this works? Okay? incumbents, it's kind of hard to get around the incumbent thing because there are too many clusters of aldermen in the same area. So no matter what you draw, you're going to have clusters of them together unless you take the path like they did going up in Bunker Hill. If you want to draw 10 of those little clusters and go separate people out, and, you know, that's not acceptable. So let me tell you how to do this. Start with the 71st district from 3 years ago. That's the anchor. Now, you take that and you bring a big portion of 71st back in the city, and then all you have to do is tweak the rest of the districts. No major concern. Remember, 5 equal districts, closely mimicking the state representative districts, and all you have to do is take the numbers of the populations in the state representation districts right now. For instance, you start with the highest district, has the most population, the 74th. You practically got to come up with about 2,000 people that they have to give up. So you just go over there, draw lines out there, get 2,000 people, put them in the 71st district. Check off the 74th district. It's done. 75th district. Where Town Plot meets Brooklyn, you could take a little sliver of that to the tune of 1,101 people and put that in the 71st district. Check off the 75th district. It's done. You could go up in the 72nd district. You have to get basically 1,200 people. You just take that portion that is to the west of the Naugatuck River, which they did in this map, put that in the 73rd. Check off the 72nd district. It's done. Okay? Now, you add that number to the current number in the 73rd district, go to the 73rd district, where a good portion of it at one time used to be in the 71st district, starting in the Robinwood section of town, for those who are familiar with it, up towards West Main Street and Park Road area. In that area, you remove that from the 73rd because they have to give up that many votes to make them equal, to hit that target number. Check off the 73rd district, check off the 71st district. We are done. It is that easy. Can we not do that? Can we not do that? Now, there's this issue about neighborhoods. There's this issue about neighborhoods and the district lines and the difference, okay? In state rep districts, the state rep districts have a lot of our neighborhoods that are really nestled very well within them already. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. They pretty much right now go hand in hand. If you use the state rep districts, go through this exercise, you will pretty much achieve that feat. Now, I share that concept with the demographer that any solution to this that's going to follow the state rep districts has to start with bringing the 71st district back into the city from 3 years ago. And the other people I moved into it from the 74th, most of those people at one point in time were in the 71st district. They're going home. The people in the 73rd district that were moving back into the 71st district, at one point, they were in the 71st district. They're going home. You're just tweaking the rest. Let's make it simple. Let's keep it simple. Let's not complicate it. And when we number these districts, can we take a little number in the middle of these districts in the 71st and put a 1? The 72nd district, can we put a 2? 73rd, 3? 74th, 4? 75th, 5? Let's not change the numbers and confuse people anymore. Can we keep it simple? Also, I would ask that the gentleman is from out of town. I would suggest it makes a lot of sense that the next time you start drawing these lines, that maybe people from the panel who could make themselves available could sit down with him when you're starting to draw these lines, people who have knowledge of the neighborhoods, the districts, and you shouldn't, in my opinion, to have a seat there you shouldn't be presenting what this should be. You should have input into what is developed. Nobody should have to give you that. You're there to participate, not to have somebody give you something. So I will hope that you would request to be at the table when the next lines are drawn. Because, to draw something that favor a couple of people is one thing. Okay, that's going to work for them. But your name is going to be associated with this for the next 10 years, and you want to do what's right. And the members from this panel that were on the Charter Revision Commission, you know what the intent was. And that's closely following these state rep districts. Let's do it. But it is that easy. And the minority, worried about the minority numbers, you can do that in such a way that you can have what I just explained will put you in the exact, almost within 1% difference, 1.1% difference than what is currently in place. Okay? And let's not talk about minorities. I'm African American. I'm in the 72nd District. I can prevail up there. In the 75th District, Victor Cuevas, the Hispanic, wins. So it's not like you're going to dilute anything or put anybody at any disadvantage, because it seems to work already. It just worked. There's no mystery here. Let's stop making this convoluted. Go back to the simple action, and you can achieve this. And if you need some help, I have exact numbers, exact boundaries. If somebody were to ask me, I provided some information, but it can work within one, and the total differential in population would be less than 5%, probably less than 2%. And all the ethnic changes can be within probably less than 2%. Not 5, not 10. It's achievable. It's simple. Let's do it. And I don't want to see another plan that looks like this.
Thank you, Larry.
Next speaker from 380 Hickok Road, Anthony DeGennaro.
I'm Anthony DeGennaro from 380 Hitchcock Road. I've spoken at many public meetings. This is the first time I've agreed with just about everybody that stood here, which is a little shocking, since I can't even get my own family to agree with me at times. The strength of the neighborhoods is one of the things that we constantly hear, and yet it's something that is kind of distorted in the plan. 20 out of 21 districts in this town voted to create this panel. And they did it because they recognized that under the old form, the Board of Aldermen was the election of the Board of Aldermen was a relatively meaningless process. That being nominated by the central committee or the local central committee was paramount to election. 18 run, 15 get elected. How can you lose? Las Vegas doesn't give you those kind of odds. So as a result, some districts were overrepresented while others had little or no representation. And now tonight we look at this plan and there's been a significant effort to protect incumbent seats. To do so is an attempt to continue the shortcomings of the present system. Protecting incumbency should be the last consideration, or better yet, not considered at all. I appreciate that this would not make friends with members of the Board of Aldermen, but gee, that's tough. And we should go a long way to resolving one of the most egregious aspects of our present system. The question rose that the difficulties the political parties are going to have in choosing candidates for the Board of Aldermen. However, I assume that they are going to choose people who live in the districts they wish to represent, unlike the British parliamentary system. And those people would be chosen by local caucuses, hopefully, if the committees are smart in doing it that way. If they keep control of those positions, they may find it difficult to get their people elected, which is the primary function of a local political party. I'm interested in seeing what you do. This was a good start. The one thing that bothers me most is the first district, which, and I will use the word aberration rather than another word I'd like to use for that particular aspect of this map. I hope you do a good job, and I hope you can withstand the nonsense that you're going to be hit with in the next few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 30 Madison Street, Gerardo Reyes, Jr.
Thank you, Steve. Geraldo Reyes, Jr., 30 Madison Street. Chairman Panel, Commissioners, thank you for serving on this very important and crucial charter revision to the City of Waterbury. What's important here at the end of the day is that, as the gentleman before me just spoke, said 20 out of 21 neighborhoods voted for Alderman by district. So the City of Waterbury has not only asked for it, it's going to get it. And you guys are commissioned to deliver the best possible plan that the City of Waterbury can get. I just want to point out the changes that are made, however minute it may seem to the commissioners or to the folks that are working on this plan. The 75th District, 75-5, which is Brooklyn, is an area that seems to be well, it's in the 75th, but it seems to be an area that we're constantly tweaking. In the last 4 years in working in that neighborhood, the 75th, I can assure you from having talked to most of the most of the registered voters that are in the 75th, how upset and confused they are. And some of those voters, from the last time we made a change, that they don't even want to come across the river to vote in another house on the other side of the Naugatuck River. And all we did was change their polling place. The 75th-5 right now on the revised map shows 3 different districts and 4 different polling places. It's a recipe for disaster. It's an area that we suffer, we struggle to get these folks to come out to vote. So again, no matter how minute we think these changes are, they're catastrophic when we try to pull the voters out. Waterbury's numbers of voters are declining. Our end goal here is to get voters to come out and increase these numbers, not decrease them by the decisions that are made here. Thank you for your service, and good luck with the decisions.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker from 925 Roanoke Road, Thomas Van Stone, Jr.
Thomas Van Stone, Jr., 925 Roanoke Road. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you very much for being on this commission. I know how long and tiring it can be on this. Several of us did this together over the summer with the Charter Revision Commission, and I think we all understand how important this is, so thank you for your service. The one thing that I think I really have a difficult problem with this first map is the place that we started. If you paid attention to what the Charter Revision Commission discussed and what they put forward to the Board of Aldermen and what we voted on, and if you paid attention to what people said when they came to those meetings, it was very clear that the driving force behind Alderman by District was the fact that established neighborhoods don't have a presence on the Board of Aldermen. It wasn't because we wanted to preserve incumbencies. It wasn't because of race or ethnicity or socioeconomic status. It was because we know what our neighborhoods are. And I appreciate the effort that was put into this, and I understand a lot of the legal logistics around why you have to do certain numbers and certain different demographics. I appreciate that. I get that. So with all due respect to those that put this together, it was a lot of hard work. But I think the public trust is best obtained when you start from the place that they think this should be starting. And I think if the map first came out showing all those lines that we see on this map that identify all our known established neighborhoods and prove to the people of the city why you can't strictly go by those numbers because certain blocks will be way out of balance by a lot of the rules that you have to follow, I think the people would have respected that and appreciated that a little bit more, and there wouldn't have been as much outrage about the way this map is written.
So I think if we go back to that and we show the people that the established neighborhoods are a place to start, but they don't work for specific reasons, and then adjust the borders according to that, I think we've got a better way to go about this. And I think people will trust the process more. People will be able to provide better input as to why they think lines should be in certain places. And I think we'll all appreciate this in the end a little bit more. So thank you for the hard work that was put in, Dr. Morrison and the folks that have worked on this. But I think the starting point has to be the neighborhoods. It can't be any conversation about incumbency. It has to be the neighborhoods. Please start with that. Bring us something that looks like that, and then let's talk about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 107 Citizens Avenue, Ruben Rodriguez.
Good day, guys. I'm Ruben Rodriguez from 107 Citizens Avenue. I'm the chairman for the Latino National Republican Coalition of Connecticut. And I just want to say something real quick because everybody already spoke and kind of everybody's on the same page that we're here for. And really that map right there, it's not going to work. A lot of times me and Butler, we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but this time we do. And he knows about it. I'm in the 4th district, the one that it's in the middle. And Rachel put a lot of points on it, and a lot of the guys did. And one question that I always have is, why those 2 districts? The thing is the green one, I don't know what number it is, and the 4th, they have the less voter registration there. And the rest of the guys all around it have 22,000 registered voters. That's the question that I always ask. And why we have to jump the river and when we could take out everything in the other side. And I just wanted to say that, like I said, you know, a lot of the guys are here, we're in the same page, and that's a good thing when a community comes together and in the same page and tells the people that are in front of you that we have to change this. So thank you so much and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker from 66 Fleetwood Drive, Alderwoman Stephanie Cummings.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the Commission. Waterbury is a city of many communities. The voters of our community spoke loudly last November for the need for more direct, community-based representation. The voters have entrusted us to create equitable districts that are a fair fight and are not slanted in favor of any one particular political party. The voters did not entrust us to create incumbent protection districts. The map before us distorts our communities while ensuring protection for the powerful. This is not what the people have asked for. We must ensure that these communities of interest are maintained and not parceled out in an attempt to save incumbents. This map needs to be revisited with the communities, not the incumbents in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 33 Baker, Alderman Christopher Orsini.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Dr. Morrison, statistical analysis makes for good political theater, as you can see. I can tell from the map that when you first did the analysis, it really was the strict analysis, meaning the city became jumbled rather than correctly stirred softly to see what we can do. But I do agree with Jimmy Griffin, and I do agree with Ron Napoli that the existing districts, the representative districts, have met all the criteria for the legal as well as the division by population. The only district that's light would be the 71st. Most of the districts, or all of the districts, currently have about 25,000 people, plus or minus, as Dr. Morrison had illustrated. Each district has about 13,000 registered voters, based on the registered voting list, most recent list, 2014. So they're pretty well established, not only by population, registered voter, but as well as what Mr. Van Stone was saying, the neighborhoods and the association of those neighborhoods. In the 74th, which is in my district, we have Bully Manor, which is cut in half. As chairman of the membership committee for the East End Community Club, they're our sister club, and we like to have them around, but half of them can't really get involved in the voting process in the 74th. So if you take a look at all of the districts that have been established by the state of Connecticut and vetted through the Supreme Court of the state of Connecticut, all we're really looking at is 71 that needs to be modified. If we deduct the 7,500 people that are in the town of Middlebury, we end up with about 16,000 people in the 71st. If we slowly move some districts around by taking some from the 72nd, you'll see Colonial Avenue is kind of sticking out there all by itself. You'll see half of Bully Manor is in the 75th, that can come in. I have White City in the 74th, which is all by itself, cut off by the highway, in the 75th district. It wouldn't take much, I don't believe, to comply with the legal and statutory requirements of the state of Connecticut and of your analysis, your statistical analysis, to make this work without really jumbling and sending a map like that out to the general public. Recognize that that map was strictly done by the statistical analysis that you did, and it was a little shocking to all of us, of course. But I think the speakers here tonight have clearly indicated, and I think the maps and statistical numbers that have been played out to you show that I don't believe that we're going to need that much of a change in what the districts that have already been established. So take a look at those. We may want to have a next meeting to have Dr. Morrison give us an analysis of the existing districts and how they meet population, both Black and Hispanic, to make sure they meet the means test as it is. So that would be something I'd like to see at the next meeting, if you don't mind, Dr. Morrison. In any event, thank you for your service, and we'll see you next meeting.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker from 905 Per Lake Road, Lisa Lassard.
Good evening, Lisa Lassard, 905 Per Lake Road. Basically, when they were doing the alderman by district, we were here each and every time, a lot of people in this audience, and one thing we were asking for was, which I heard everybody say, the key, the neighborhoods which were already existing, not the neighborhoods that were going to exist. We never thought that was going to change. Basically, I live in the 75th district, and so you know, the 75th district has never had an alderman, period, ever, on this board, or an alderwoman. They never did. But the thing is, we need somebody within our districts that live there, that understand, that know what's going on and how it's going on. I mean, I understand that you have this plan. I believe it's a start, but you need to tweak it, and you need to do it, not for the better interest of each and every alderman that are presently sitting on this board, but for the better interest of the people within the city, which are the constituents that voted for this in the first place. So if you have the better interest of each and every taxpayer, please retweak this. Make sure that Brooklyn is within the 75th district, as they were before, prior to. I mean, we're trying to get more people, as everybody said, to the voting polls. We don't want to confuse them. You confuse them, we're going to have less people coming out, and nobody's going to want to vote, period. Living in the 75th district, I know there's a lot of people that moved from Mohawk to Washington Park, which is only down the street, and they refuse to sign an absentee ballot. They refuse to go to the polls, and those are votes they are missing. So if you want to do something, work for the better interest of each and every taxpayer, not the present aldermen that are sitting there, because everybody, as Lawrence Pillow said last night on his TV show, can be replaced. They're doing a good job, but you need to give somebody else a try. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker from 11 Steuben Street, Alderman Lawrence V. DiPillo.
Lawrence DiPillo from 11 Steuben Street. Good evening, Commissioners, and to all the people in the audience tonight, as well as to those speakers. You know, I believe Larry Butler said it best tonight, that you really have to look at the city of Waterbury and how it was situated a number of years back. You know, I've been talking to the Registrar of Voters office, because in 2000, the city of Waterbury had 5
distinct districts. There was no Middlebury. The 71st, as Representative Butler said, encompassed part of Robinwood, part of Brooklyn, and part of Pearl Lake Road area. And the rest of the districts pretty much mirrored what they are today, except they were somewhat expanded because of the change in the 71st to include Middlebury. That should have been the starting point. I asked the Registrar of Voters tonight if she had been contacted by either Mr. Casagrande or Mr. Morrison. She had not. I don't understand how that's possible, since Patty Mohall probably has more historic knowledge about how the districts in this city have been set up in the last 40 years than anyone else in the city, and she wasn't contacted. Furthermore, it's the Registrar of Voters who's going to have to put these polling places together. And the way this map currently is situated, there are polling places that are going to sit in the midst of 3 districts, such as Bunker Hill. Absolutely ridiculous. And again, she has the knowledge as to where polling places are, where polling places are available, and how those would work within the district voting. Was she contacted? No. We heard an awful lot tonight about how this, you can't dilute, you can't, I guess the other is combine. What we're forgetting is, and it really does irritate me, is we're all Waterburyans. We're all citizens of the United States. There's nothing worse than getting a form from the U.S. government where you have to say if you're black, or you're Hispanic, or you're Asian, or you're white. We're citizens. And this plan should be to bring the citizens of Waterbury together, not to divide us. And that's what's being presented here tonight. A way to divide the city of Waterbury, not a way to bring all of us together. I supported Alderman by district since the 80s. I knew this plan would pass, and I voted for it. Because the citizens are absolutely right. There has not been representation throughout the 5 districts in the city of Waterbury. And again, I have to compliment Representative Butler. The first district should be 71, should be 1, 72 should be 2, 73 should be 3, 74 should be 4, and 75 should be 5. Why anybody in the world would want to confuse the public more than they already are is beyond me. So, there's certain things that are just very simplistic. Waterbury is a very diverse city. Waterbury is a melting pot. If you look at, they said they looked at the census tracts. Waterbury is made up of a very large Albanian population that didn't exist in this city 5 years ago. Waterbury has always been and will be a melting pot. And I think we're all proud of that. My neighbors have been black, they've been Hispanic, they've been Greek, they've been Italian, they've been Irish. And I live on a street with 6 houses and we all get along fine. And that's really what Waterbury is. And that's what we have to make sure Waterbury is going to stay. Not what was put before here us tonight. So, I really think this commission, if Mr. Morrison and Mr. Casagrande aren't going to do it, then I think it's imperative for this commission to bring the Registrar of Voters and the Town Clerk before you and let them tell you how the city of Waterbury was defined as 5 separate workable districts with a number of voting places that people could walk to and drive to. Because once this plan is finished, those polling places have to be established. Can you imagine walking into a polling place and saying, oh yeah, you're District 1, you're over there, and these are the 2 aldermen you're voting for, and by the way, you're in District 4, and you're all going to go over here, and you're going to vote for these. Come on, folks. I mean, did anybody give any thought at all to this plan? And as far as the incumbents, there are no incumbents. I'm not an incumbent. Pernaruski's not an incumbent. Pacoci's not an incumbent. Our term ends this year. And we have to go before the people in our district and convince them that we will properly represent not only them in that district, but again, all the citizens in Waterbury. Because I believe that all of the scare tactics about the fact that this district is going to be pitted against this district and that district is going to go for this and the other ones, that's not going to happen. I sit on the Board of Aldermen. We're going to work as 15 people for the betterment of the city of Waterbury, but I do believe that the citizens are correct. They need to know who they can go to when they have a problem, and they need to know that that alderman really is concerned about their neighborhoods and the issues in their neighborhoods, whether they be blight, whether they be crime, whether they be ATVs tearing up their parks. They need to know that there's an alderman out there who's going to be concerned about that. And if that alderman, the only thing that they have an interest in, as unfortunately has been the case in this city far too long, is opening up their packet on the night of the Board of Aldermen, then they will be replaced by the people in that district. And that is what Alderman by District is about. So to Mr. Casagrande, to Mr. Morrison, you need to get together with the right people, including the people on this commission, and take a good look at what Larry Butler said, talk to Patty Mulhall, and let's put this together the right way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 195 Eastern Avenue, Izine Diaz.
Good evening. My name is Isaiah Diaz, and I live on 195 Eastern Avenue in the beautiful but always overly neglected north end of Waterbury, 2 blocks from East Farm Street. So I look at this map in the beginning, and I've always been in favor of Alderman by District. I've even advocated for it in the past because I didn't have anybody that I could go to address the needs of my community and my neighborhood. And I didn't have anybody to hold accountable either, because the majority of the elected officials on the Board of Aldermen were either from the east or the west end of the city. So lo and behold, I'm saying to myself, I'm finally taken back that, wow, there might be actually some justice and an opportunity for adequate representation for my neighborhood on the Board of Aldermen, and then we are presented with this draft here. Before I went to law school and decided to ruin my life, I studied undergrad and I took a political science class. And when you guys all go home tonight, I want you to go to Wikipedia and I want you to Google the word gerrymandering. And when you read that term, you're going to scroll down and you're going to see an example of a map that was placed in a periodical back in the day when the term first became popular. And if you just turn it to the side, it will look exactly like the 1st District. Call me on that. I'm not on Facebook right now, but I'll be back in a month. My concern was this. I wanted Alderman by District because I wanted somebody from my neighborhood who understand what we were going through, that I can have a voice on the Board of Aldermen. However, with this map here, I went to Wilby High School, I went to Bucks Hill Elementary School, I went to North End Middle School. It's no longer in my district. I live on Easton Avenue towards where it meets Tudor Street. If I walk down 2 blocks, now I'm in another district. So you're fracturing an already taken neighborhood. I'll be honest with you, Larry Butler's idea was brilliant. I said we just cut the check to him, have him sit at the table, let's fix the plan and let's make this happen. But there's 3 things that we need to, I know anyone would, right? It's better than doing it for free all the time like we do. There are 3 things to take into consideration: transparency, integrity, and stewardship. When I see that map, I see no transparency because I can tell just by looking at it that that appears to be something that's gerrymandered. Even though the individuals are outside consultants and people are being paid, the perception of the general public is going to be that was rigged. Number 2, integrity. Integrity says that if we have 5 districts already that are closely working and that already have tight-knit communities, move them over a little bit and keep them intact so that the people can stay working with the individuals in the same neighborhoods, in the same parks, and in the same schools that they've been familiar with their entire lives. And then 3rd, I just forgot because I was flowing. Anyway, stewardship, thank you. I appreciate that. Stewardship. Incumbency should not be criteria for drawing these lines, because when an individual is trusted by the public to take an elected seat, it's not your seat, you don't own it, it's not promised to you, you're not entitled to it, you're a steward of that position until the people that you serve say, okay, it's time for you to go. Therefore, I would say that incumbency should not be any criteria, and I think we should adopt a plan that's similar to the one that Larry Butler presented this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's the last speaker tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Good comments, good points of thinking. We are now at the phase of asking my commission colleagues if they have any thoughts, questions, or what have you for our demographer and our attorney. Please.
Okay. I'd just like to touch on a few points. The first thing is I've looked at the plan that State Representative Larry Butler has presented tonight, and the numbers are basically spot on. The deviation percentages are extremely minimal. It works. It makes sense. The main point that was touched on tonight by pretty much every speaker was neighborhoods. This plan doesn't work that we've been presented with. I think we really do need to look at State Rep Larry Butler's plan, and that should be our starting point going forward.
Thank you. Mike.
Mr. Chairman, in that vein, in that vein, I'd like to submit to the commission the proposal by our esteemed state representative. I only have one copy. I'd like this to be copied so that all the commissioners may have this in front of them. It's very practical, it's very doable, and it's the only way to go, and the people want it. Do I need to make a motion to have this draft?
Please.
Okay. Therefore, I make a motion that the draft that was proposed by Representative Larry Butler be placed as a draft that we will consider and act upon.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion's carried. Thank you. Any questions, discourse, or comments? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I think that should be added as Exhibit 6.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Exhibit number 6.
Okay.
Also.
Okay.
Joyce, they're just going to add it in physical Exhibit 7, Larry's plans, for our consideration next week.
Can the commission take a vote on this?
Sure.
You want to throw out the roll call?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we have a comment from Joy.
You say yes, yeah.
I was wondering if we might be able to add a posting of the map of the state districts. The existing ones. If that might be added. There is?
Is there the current state boundaries for the General Assembly already part of our submission in the exhibits?
No.
No, there isn't.
No. No. Yeah, I would.
Okay, so. Chairman? So we'll make a motion. Can we restate the motion prior to voting?
Yes, the motion is, first, is for Mike's motion of adding on for number 7 exhibit, is that correct?
Chairman, also Mr. Orsini submitted a plan which I think should be entered as Exhibit 8.
So do we want to take a vote for each one?
Unless you can do it by a vote or by consensus.
Yeah, Mr.
Are we all in agreement? May I have a motion that we're going to go forward with this approach?
Yes.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Can we do a roll call and a vote?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, under discussion, one more thing. Some other plans that were submitted via the internet, such as Rachel Guest, who drew plans, I'm not sure if they correlate well, but why don't we, if I can, restate the motion to include all the submitted plans for our consideration, and, you know, as exhibits, whatever they are numerically, then I think we can look at those that we like and consider those. But at least everyone gets considered. So.
Are we in agreement? We're going to take a motion for a vote on all submissions that have been done by this commission.
And introduce them as full exhibits.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus the existing state.
Right.
Plus the existing.
Plus the existing. A map that shows.
General Assembly.
Okay, I don't know if do we have that map? Okay, you can certainly direct us.
Is it part of Larry's submission?
Attorney Casagrande, I have it here. I have only one copy. I can't submit it to you as long as I can get the original copy back, okay?
Yes. With the chair's permission, I'll take that and we'll submit that as an exhibit to the clerk, and then we'll certainly get back your original to you.
So we have a motion to vote on all of the submissions that are going to be placed in, including the ones that Joyce had asked for delineation.
Right.
Correct.
And the city clerk will take a roll vote.
Commissioner Black? Yes. Commissioner Green?
Yes.
Commissioner Colo?
Yes.
Commissioner Pagano?
Yes.
Commissioner Pizzuto?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes.
Commissioner Salvio?
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton?
Yes.
8 yes.
Yes. Yes.
8 yes.
Motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. What, Mr. Pagano, is it?
Salvio.
What you submitted to me, I just want to make clear for the record what this is. It's several documents. One is entitled, in handwriting, Current State Districts as compared to the proposed new city districts. And then the second one is, I believe, a copy of what Representative Butler was introducing, just for the record. And then, just for the record, could you just tell us what these other documents are behind it? Were these submitted by Mr. Butler as well?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess this will be, I guess we're at Exhibit 9 now for number 8. Okay. I think what we want to do is make number 9 with the chair's permission, the submission by Mr. Pagano, which is a multi.
Salvio. I'm Pagano. Salvio.
Salvio. I'm sorry. And that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 page document as described, as I just described. And we'll submit that as collectively as Exhibit 9. That's okay. That's okay.
So we're square?
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from my esteemed group of colleagues at this stage?
Thank you.
Jeff. Oh, yeah. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a formal motion that the demographer take the neighborhoods into consideration first and incumbency last. I know it was spoken about a lot, but we didn't codify that in our discussion, so I'd like to make that motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any discussion? We all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Any other comments? Thoughts?
I have a thought, but
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Please.
Our consultants probably need to sit down and talk with voter registration?
Yeah.
Maybe us? Okay. Okay. I don't know, I just want to put, okay.
Mr. Chairman, would that have to be a motion that we'd all have to accept? Can we set up a schedule to meet with those folks?
Well,
It was just a comment. I didn't know if it needed to be, does it need to be a motion?
Good question. I would imagine. Yeah, if you want to take a motion to commit
I make a
to
motion,
working with the
right.
interactive.
Right.
Is there a
Be a
second?
little more interactive with the, okay.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
So for clarification, Mr. Chairman, to the attorney and to the demographer, Dr. Morrison, just to have conversations with the city clerk and the town clerk, as well as the existing board members, either by phone, email, we could meet, whatever may work, as well as the next meeting. But prior to that, if we can, the city clerk and the town clerk would be a starting point. And just, again, it doesn't motion, just, so we're throwing a lot of things at you. So
Yeah, no, I understand.
Is there a...
Particularly before you draft another map.
Before you draft the next plan, we're saying, yeah.
Right. The only, the logistical problem is the next meeting is Wednesday night.
Yeah,
It's coming Wednesday. So I should state for the record that, remember at the last meeting when the chair, you approved the motion authorizing the chair to send out letters to differing stakeholder groups. I believe that the registrars of voters were included in that. I could be mistaken, but obviously what we'll do through Dr. Morrison and ourselves, we'll reach out to the registrars, the city and town clerk, and try to get as much information from them and their input as we can, subject to our time limitations of next week. Dr.
I said, the only reason I request that is because a lot of your information you said was based on the census. I'm not sure when the last census was taken as opposed to what, 2001? 10.
And the voter registration information would be more up to date.
Well, I'm thinking maybe, possibly.
I hope so.
What's the problems they may face with the polling places and things like that? Yeah. It's got to be...
Dr. Morrison, just for clarification of what our charge is going forward, are we correct to understand that basically what you'd like us to do is to take Representative Butler's plan, talk with Representative Butler, if he's available, as well as the registrars of voters and any other people that Dr. Morrison thinks should be involved, and then have him come back with a new plan that uses Mr. Butler's plan as a so-called base case scenario? Yes. Is that the intent of the commission, Mr. Chairman?
I think that is the message that is being sent.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay, we'll do our best. And we also have, remember, we have next week, and we also have the 22nd for additional public comment.
We understand it's going to be an iterative approach.
Right, but we'll do our best to get something back to you that's responsive.
Thank you very much. I think with that, we are done. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
This meeting is adjourned. Are we adjourned? We're adjourned. Thank you. Oh, yeah, there is one more item I need to make everyone aware of, a correction.
That's fine.
On the plan, we delineated January 29th as our last meeting. It is in reality January 28th, Wednesday evening, not Thursday evening. The minutes, if you saw them on the website, were in error. Thank you.